Well, good evening, everybody. So glad you're here for the next to last Wednesday summer series. This week we have Reverend Caleb Haynes with us again to talk about his new book, Earthbound Christian. And he does have books in the back. So he has books from his first book, Garbage Theology. He has the Earthbound Christian one, and he has the Keeping Creation study, which we actually went through last year on Wednesday nights, if you were here then. I think it was in the fall, I can't remember. I know we went through it. So, but you can always pick that back up and go through that yourself. It's a really great study. So with actually several authors involved in that. So I'm going to let Caleb first tell a little bit about what this book is about, and then we've got some questions that we'll be going through. And remember, as we go, if you raise your hand, and we can bring a microphone to you and you can ask the question as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Caleb real quick. So tell us a little bit about Earthbound Christian and what the impetus was for writing this book.
Yeah. Thanks for having me back out. Always love hanging out with you guys. I don't get to spend enough time in church gymnasiums anymore. It's just raised in the Church of the Nazarene. It's part of your DNA in here. You got to come back in to get re-sanctified every now and then. But so my new book is called Earthbound Christian, and the subtitle is Flourishing Within Limits in the Age of Infinite Growth. And that sounds like a mouthful, and it kind of is, but that's my favorite kind of subtitle, though. It just leaves you a little dry at the end, so the sort of the premise is we talk a lot about what it means to be heaven-bound as the people of God. But what does it mean that we are also earthbound? That, I like to say that as much as we talk about escaping this place, right, we are actually created within and for this place called Earth, right? We're actually here on purpose, right? It's kind of audacious to just sort of name, but, and so what does it mean that we are also supposed to be here as well? And that every time, when you look through the scriptures, you don't usually find heaven off by itself somewhere in the text. You usually find it with earth. Heaven and earth, right? All throughout Scripture, and so it's just one of those sort of aspects that I think is really important for us to dig in to say, well, what does it mean that we are actually created from the earth, right, by intention, and what does it mean to be in right relatedness with the earth? And these are all questions I'm sort of grappling at. But so one of the titles that I floated around prior was finite theology, and that's kind of maybe in some ways a better description. But what does it mean that we are finite creatures? That everything around you is finite, and that it has limits. We have limits. Everything has limits, and sort of out of that question and out of that framework that I wrote the book. That we are limited creatures, constantly trying to live unlimited lives. So there's kind of a tension there.
That's good. I noticed the way you open the book is with confession. And I've read a lot of books on a lot of things, and usually when we're talking about creation care or caring for the earth, the books either start out with a lot of data or they start out with a lot of guilt. So why did you choose to start with confession?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that that's sort of the thing that I wanted to convey in the beginning, is that what's needed is sort of a confrontation of our own humanity and what it means to be human, and that I don't know that we can go anywhere until we've done that a little bit better, I think, as the people of God, and coming from a place like no one has all this figured out, and that's sort of the thing with I'm going to say creation care, or taking care of the environment. There's sort of this maybe camp over here that's like, well, we just got to try harder, and that's not altogether wrong. I'm not saying, but there's sort of this myth that if we can do it perfectly, if we can make all the right choices, if we can, so in a way, overcome our humanity, maybe we can sort of fix these environmental problems. I'm giving sort of broad strokes here. Rather than, and this is why I wanted us to kind of open the book in this place of, being an eco-hypocrite, and just sort of naming that, what if it actually has more to do with us embracing our humanity? And what if we'll only ever find our way into healing and re-entering right relatedness with each other and with creation by first going there, by first leaning into the kind of creatureliness that God intends for us. So that's kind of a way around to with that confession. And I open with this story, and so this story I open with. So I think I wrote some of that first chapter sitting in Heathrow Airport, actually, which is the most hypocritical place you can be. I was in the UK. I'd flown across the world to study eco-theology. So, I mean, how much more? I was either the least qualified or the most qualified to be flying. Either way, you could turn the gem either way, but that's sort of the absurdity of it already. But I was actually thinking about another time that I'd taken a flight with my wife, who is a force for good in the world, and leaning hard on the word force, and also leaning hard on the word good. But she's great, but don't cross her. But no, so we were on this flight, and the flight attendant's coming by, and you know how they're like, we're picking up the trash, and so it's a hand it off, and we have this soda can, right, this aluminum can, and my wife wants to know if they're going to recycle it. And the flight attendant's like, yeah, we're going to recycle it. And just kind of like brushes her off. And, Emily's sort of BS meter's kind of flashing. She's like, I think I'll just hold on to this. And the flight attendant's like, no, you're going to need to give me that can. And they go back and forth. And finally, the other flight attendant comes and is like, it's okay, you can keep the can, because it became a whole thing. So there's this whole story of like trying to go upstream to recycle this can, but you're on an airplane flying 20,000 feet in the air. The absurdity is like, you're spewing carbon into the atmosphere, but you're gonna like recycle this can. And that to me feels like often what it feels like to try and care for creation in our day and age. But yeah.
It's a good story, and I could see Emily, because I've been in a room
if
when she's being a force. So I could just see that holding on to that can really tightly, and you were probably just
I was just getting in my turtle shell, just like, just gonna survive this.
And it's a great picture of the absurdity of how we can get so focused on small things, and the big thing is right there in front of us.
Absolutely.
Which brings me to another question. You tell a story of your kids kind of becoming eco-bullies on a hayride, yelling at a neighbor for burning trash. So, and you talk about Brene Brown, who we heard a little bit about Brene Brown when Shauna Gaines was here, but talking about the difference between guilt and shame, these two different things. And so, how do you tell the difference between guilt that moves us and the shame that shuts us down, both in ourselves and how we react to other people?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And yeah, Brene Brown is amazing, and a lot of times now when we think about her, if you're familiar with her, she, wrote the book Daring Greatly, which everyone should read. It's wonderful. But that primary distinction is that guilt and shame are not the same thing, and guilt can actually have sort of a holy purpose in the world that helps us realize maybe we're off the path. But shame is something else, right? Shame is sort of stems from maybe our past trauma or these shadows that we're carrying around with ourselves. And oftentimes people might go their whole lives and not realize that they're carrying a lot of that around. And actually I wrote a Substack maybe like 6 months ago on shame and I think extinction or something. But I watched the movie Thunderbolts. Did you guys see that movie, Thunderbolts? It was like a Marvel movie that came out last year. But in my opinion, that whole movie is just about shame, and it's like really powerful, and they're sort of battling through these shadows, and that, and anyway, this is maybe going to sound a little meta, but I think if you could peel away all the layers to what's causing environmental destruction today, you would find a just room full of shame. I think you would find, people who unfortunately haven't, done the work to connect with why they're living the way that they're living, why that they're living out of a certain posture that ultimately does harm to other people in God's creation. Now that's way down the rabbit hole, but I do think that there's something underneath there to say. You kind of brought up in the beginning, I sort of opened in this sort of place of humanity and confession versus maybe some other eco books that open up with the scary stories. And I've been guilty of that too, I guess. It's like, because there does come a time where we need to just look at the things and feel a little terror in order to spur action maybe. But when it comes down to it, it's sort of the other side of it, of like, I don't think we're going to get anywhere with anyone trying to take care of the earth until we look each other in the eye and remind each other that you are loved, and that you are loved, and that you are forgiven, and that you belong, and that you are loved. And I think until we do that, I don't know that we can go anywhere else. But yeah.
It's really good. I saw a review that mentioned that this was one of the most pastoral books on creation care.
Oh.
And I agree with, especially with some of the ways that the posture you take, some of the things when you open with confession, very pastoral. But there is one part where, like, a college student wants to ask you the question, and I know this is the kind of thing that people start thinking of when they're worried or fear, but like, actually ask you, if I go eat a cheeseburger tonight or fly home for Thanksgiving, am I going to hell? And your answer was, well, if God is walking around with an eco scorecard, we're all in trouble.
Yeah.
So what do you say to the Christian who carries around the fear or the shame about just where we find ourselves?
Yeah, that's really good. That actually happened in Mount Vernon. Actually, I was years ago. I spoke in chapel, and then we did this cool little justice talk that night. And and this one young man sort of timidly asked for the microphone, and he asked that. And I was like, look, if God's carrying around an eco scorecard, we're all in trouble, and it's the whole like, I think about the Gospels, right? And all the times the Apostle Paul spends talking about like faith and works and that sort of thing, right? It's like, it's sort of that conversation, somewhat. But what let's see, what did I say to him? I said, at the end of the day, I don't believe that, me, myself, and I am gonna like save the world, right? But I care for creation. Some version of this. I care for creation because I'm Christian, right? It's not like the other. It's not like I'm doing this because it's going to save me. I do this because I follow Jesus, right? And I think that that's a really important thing that we've got to circle back to all the time, right? That ultimately we're confessing that Jesus is Lord, right? That yes, do the work, show it, like let the fruit be found in your life, right? Live a holy life within your relationship with creation as much as you can. But at the same time, we're saying Jesus is Lord. Jesus is Lord. And so so we're constantly in that sort of that mystery, that tension. And I think that's what it means to be a people of faith, right? Is to sort of hold these two, sort of faith and works all together. And yeah, I think that's a really hard thing for youth, though, because youth they really see the front lines, I think, or at least their antennas are higher for what's going on with the environment. They're looking at their whole life ahead of them, as we are too, but they're tuned in a little bit more to what's going on environmentally, and it feels, and they don't see a lot of adults in the room who are doing anything about it, and I think that feels pretty heavy for them.
Yeah. I remember being at that point as a youth with just the ideas and stuff, and I think we get jaded as we get older, and youth is often there to remind us of the things that are important. So but it also causes a lot of angst and fear within them. So, are
you one of the jaded older people?
Probably, yeah. Christy's smiling and saying yes. So.
I was just messing with you.
You talk about limits as gift, and I've got a big question, but I'm going to say that this is the ideas that you talk about here about flourishing within limits. Mm-hmm. It's actually a theme that I've seen in several books I've read within the last year, all that have come out. So Shauna Gaines actually mentions some of that in her book, Pastor as a Midwife. Andrew Root, if you're familiar with him, he wrote a book called Baal and the Gods of More, where he talks about the ways that the church has seen increase in terms of more and more and more as evidence of growth rather than discipleship. And he shows us how our culture has kind of driven some of that, the way that we live, the advertisements that we see, the ways that our lives are shaped, that we tend to move into more being better. But your whole book is running on a claim that flourishing happens within limits, and limits are God's love language. And you mentioned gravity, the tree in the garden, the moon. These all help us feel the limits and feel things in our bones. So, what's the difference between a limit that is a gift from God and a limit that is oppression that should be resisted? Yeah,
that's a really interesting framing of your question. You're a good question asker. Yeah, that's really helpful. So I was kind of saying earlier, the starting point for kind of all of this is that everything is limited. Everything has limits, right? And that comes in the form of skin, colors, shape, textures, right? Everything, borders, character features, quirks, all the things, right? There is, we can't talk about creation without talking about limits. And in that sort of whole conversation, and only then through that are we able to talk about who or what or where we love, and name the things that we love about, even thinking about someone in your family. Maybe you like the way that they smile, or the funny way their foot twitches when they're telling a joke or something. What we're trying to describe are the borders and the silhouette of the whole thing, and so this is important to think about these distinctions, because there can be no diversity, no ecosystem, ultimately no life without these edges and these frames. And so take this sort of thought of like, this is how everything is good, is that it's actually limited. Well, that's kind of funny, because I would say culturally, when we think about something being good, what we're often sold with is this vision of unlimited. Like what we want actually is what we find attractive is infinite quantities, or at least it's maybe how it's marketed to us, right? We want unlimited data. Are you with me? We want unlimited refills. Anybody got a Western Sizzlin' back in the day? We went to Western Sizzlin'. Man, that place, I was such a little country chunk. And my family used to go there after church on Sunday mornings every now and then. And I would just go right up there. It's just an open buffet. You can get whatever fried thing you want, as much as you want it, even if it kills you. And I would just fill up a plate of fried chicken livers. Where were the adults? Like no one stopped this. What I'm saying, and it's like that. Like we want it all, and so this is what we do. We have sort of an infatuation with overcoming every single barrier, right? It's the Shark Tank, right? It's not good enough for someone to have a great idea. They want to take and make money in their hometown. They want to take that idea and they want to get on Shark Tank and they want to get a $300 million investment so they can take their business all the way around the world, right? And then what? It's like we're not thinking this through, right? And when you sit here and talk about it, it does make a lot of sense just to have these limits, right? Actually, limits are God's love language. If there were no gravity, we would throw toddlers into space. There would be no burritos. It would be total chaos. But there's this other side, and I think this is kind of where you're going with that question. That it can be if you know someone or like groups of people who have been oppressed, who have been closed down with their limits, right, of access or rights, right? We think about women's voting, or equality for people of color, and so this gets a little more gray as you start talking about development of third world countries and things like that, and we're talking about trying to create more restrictions and limits on bigger countries, and that sort of thing. So you can see how like global south, global north, but maybe that's where you're going with some of that question. But I think primarily the point of the conversation is to say like, what here is embodying love? Are these limits or creating a space for love to happen and freedom and liberty, or is there oppression going on? Is there a whole people who are the ones being made to make the bricks? Are you with me? Right, the Israelites in Egypt, or any number of other scenarios, and so I kind of rambled on that one. We could go so many places with that, but
I know that's why I ask those kind of questions.
You get good answers. There at the end,
good answers. And you contrast the infinite game, kind of the endless pursuit of more, which I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Excess was kind of our love language, I would say, for my generation. But you contrast it with what you call eternal posture. You kind of lean into Norman Wurzba's language of a quantitative life versus a qualitative life. And so that's kind of quantity versus quality. Like, which is better? Would we rather have a good quality of life, or would we rather have quantity? And when we talk about that, it's all I can say is the quality of it, not necessarily the length of our life. That's not what we're talking about with quantitative, but what we have. So how does that work? So what does the eternal posture, that of qualitative life, actually look like on a normal Tuesday? Like, what does it look like for a family, not just a mystic like Wurzba?
Are you calling me a mystic?
No, I said like where's Bo?
Okay. I'm just kidding. I would totally own that probably. Yeah, I think it's more of the same, right? I mean, I think if you sit down with anyone and you ask them, would you rather have a quantitative kind of life or a qualitative kind of life? Like, would you just, I remember, I think I tell the story in the book, we're going down the grocery aisle with our kids at Kroger, and we hardly ever take our kids grocery shopping with us because it's just like, it's like trying to run a marathon with your feet tied. But anyway, so they don't get the grocery store experience much, but anyway, but we go down this aisle, and the sight that they get and we get is this like couple, and they're just raking armfuls of Gatorades down into their buggy, and then they see us, and we're like, did we bust up something here? We're sort of looking at each other, and they're like, they're $1 right, $1 Gatorades. You got to get them while you can get them, And so the thought process there is like, I guess, like hoard it while you can get the deal, And I think we've all been guilty of that to an extent. But I think we all generally, if we sit down and think about it for a minute, I think we all prefer something of substance versus a bunch of somethings without substance that I think we all know deep down that hoarding the Gatorades aren't going to make us happy or fill something inside of us. And that's kind of a funny analogy, but that's just what popped in my brain. And so to actually live that out, though, will look pretty countercultural in our time and may make some people scratch their heads about you a little bit, right? Because it could look like slowing down, not doing everything everyone else is doing. It could look like taking our time. It could look like a myriad of things there that would speak to value over substance. And I think that is a big overarching question for us today as Americans or living in any Western culture of what are there, particularly even Christian practices that are actually would make us happier, that give us a more flourishing life. And not saying that those things aren't without their sacrifices, because they surely will be, but I think in the end, right, what we find is actually something that is really beautiful. And so the limitations are necessary, but they're also really beautiful. And I think that that's something that a pattern we find in creation over and over again is that sort of meet and greet between those two. But sorry, I can't even remember the original question, but we got there.
It answered. That was a good answer about the qualitative and the quantitative.
Right, yes.
Yeah. So, and I really wish somebody had preached the Tower of Babel this way, because it was always this thing about pride and then a punishment. But you kind of put a twist on the story here to say, you read it kind of hopefully that God's answer is diversity, scattering, the gift of language and culture. So what does Babel teach us about technology, and what does it teach the church about itself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Tower of Babel is a huge resource for us as an ancient biblical text about what it looks like when a group of Americans, no, I'm just kidding, a group of people come together, and they're just doing what they're kind of created to do. They're being creative, but they've got this new technology, and they're just obsessed with how high they can go and how much they can get, and can they get all the way to heaven, and can they become like gods themselves, right? Sounds like a familiar story, right? We just did this like 8 chapters ago. But anyway, and so, but I think that there's this beautiful invitation that happens where God intervenes and says, hey, y'all come down from there, And there's this sort of call. I like to think about it like coming back down to the ground. And we read in the text that God gifts them with a diversity of languages, right? And by extension, culture, right? And you can see, like, out of that coming down, it becomes this sort of new ecosystem of people in the world, right? Of like you're thinking about it wrong, right? You're going about it all wrong. Like technology, like these bricks, right? Like that was, for them to be able to just make a brick and stack it, like that's a crazy leap forward in, an ancient world, Mesopotamia. But what they were doing with these bricks wasn't good for them and where that would have ended up, right? I talk about in the book, how my kids with Legos, they used to always try to build the biggest tower in the world. And you knew where that was going to end every time that they did it. It was going to end with like Legos stacked to the ceiling, and then it was going to fall over. Someone's eye is bleeding, the kids are crying. Anyway, and it's like God saw where this was going. Anyway, and so, yeah, I like to think that there's more going on there, but that's also just an incredibly helpful narrative for us today, thinking about heaps and bounds of technological development. And and then also like where the church is on any of that, I think is a whole conversation. But yeah,
I really do like that. I like looking at diversity as a gift, and the languages as a gift, culture, and I think when we encounter each other in those, we learn from one another, and I think it's a picture of what God wants for us. And speaking for a Nazarene crowd, especially. How does holiness theology carry creation care? So the big question is caring for the earth a sanctification issue?
Oh my gosh. That's one of my favorite topics. We've surely talked about this at some point in here. I probably have a button on the back table. I know I have some back there, but we had this one that said, it was a picture of the earth, and on it was lowercase entire, and then it says means uppercase entire. And so that's like a little if you know kind of button, because entire sanctification is one of our sort of bedrock theologies in the Church of the Nazarene, often misunderstood. But I love folding a theology of creation care into that conversation, because how are we going to talk about anything being entire without talking about all of creation, without talking about Colossians chapter 1, right, and the reconciliation of all things? I mean, it's the blinking lights on the dash. And so so I think our holiness theology just has leaps and bounds when it comes to talking about creation care. And you guys are probably familiar maybe with, John Wesley and a lot of his work. And, his best-selling book, out of everything the man wrote, his best-selling book was Primitive Physics, which was a medical book, like about how we take care of our bodies. And he went everywhere with a Bible and a medical bag. Everywhere he went with tinctures and things to help people with common ailments, because he recognized that following Jesus meant caring for people's bodies. It had bodily, material implications in the world. And so I just love that so much, and I think we miss so much of that, and we don't talk about that enough. And so holiness, I mean, we could talk about Leviticus. I mean, I think we've maybe talked about that in a previous time. Like, I mean, it's all material. It's like, don't harvest these fruit trees too much. Don't let your sideburns go crazy. And, stop mixing material together, And these are all questions about what it meant to serve and reflect a holy God in that ancient time. And so, get me started.
Entire means entire.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Pastor Hunter might be smiling just a little bit about that. So.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yes, we got
Yeah,
to.
there are some. Wesley did have some weird ideas too. Like he thought
Oh, yeah, for
electricity was a
sure.
work of the Holy Spirit, but I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
when it works, it works.
I mean,
So,
it's also kind of hard to argue with that.
Yeah,
But yeah.
Yeah,
That we should talk about that. Yeah.
So, but yeah. So,
That's good.
and speaking of that kind of thinking, subatomic salvation.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
And this is something I think I've talked a little bit about it, quantum level stuff when it comes to free will, because my friend Tom Ord talks about even quantum level choice, that we see what we call chaos theory and things is really choice being made at that level. So you trace salvation all the way down to molecules, to kind of make the point that, the water that we're drinking is passed through Jesus' body. There's this, remember, all things made through him. And you talk about the paralytic story where Jesus kind of combines forgiveness and healing in the same story. It's both your sins are forgiven and then take up your mat and walk. And, there's almost an implication that the forgiveness is almost harder than the walking part. But what changes about our gospel when we stop treating salvation as a ticket out of here and start treating it as the healing of everything?
Yeah. One of my pet peeves is, what I call ticket theology, and we traffic, unfortunately, in a lot of ticket theology in the church, and it's like it's just something that we've been handed a lot. And that's okay. We've all been handed lots of things, but I do think it is up to us now to, turn back to Scripture and reorient ourselves around what Scripture actually says and what is actually going on in the text there. And so, yeah. And so I think. Sorry, I'm trying to remember how you actually framed your question.
Stop treating salvation as a ticket out of here.
Oh, and subatomic stuff. Yeah.
Treat it more as the healing of everything.
Right. Yeah. So, get lost in my own head there. Yeah, many of you know, so if you look up the Latin word from salvation, you get salve, right? Which is a salve, like a healing ointment. Did you guys ever use Vicks Vapo Rub back in the day? Is that still a thing? I have vivid memories of my mom rubbing that green stuff over me, and just you're just breathing. I bet if I got a whiff of that, I would be instantly 5. But I think about the salveness of salvation and what it means that it is permeating and that it is covering and that it is finding its way even into the molecules. And so, the heart of that is back to sort of that text from Colossians, right? That all things are being wrapped into the story, the overarching story of salvation. And, and if we go through Scripture, if we go to the prophets and Jeremiah and Isaiah and then back to John and Revelation, who's just repeating these prophets, we're seeing not God making all new things, but God making all things new. And it's this just beautiful coming together, right, again, of heaven and earth. There at the end, and so we're just so fascinated by this idea that we're going somewhere, and that came from a lot of other kind of places and culture. But again, I really don't believe our gospel is an overcoming story. Actually, it's a story where we are becoming the people who God has created us to be, and it's really, really, really good. And so, I think about sharing the gospel message and how much juicier and I want to say better the gospel message is when it includes all of God's creation. It's not just about our soul, right? It's like the gospel just went from good to like amazing, right? When we start really playing and understanding the implications of this kind of soteriology and eschatology in our daily lives. And yeah.
That's really good. And you all will probably recognize this question I'm about to ask, because if you were in Pastor Hunter's class on resurrection, you've heard this kind of talk a lot, both the last question and this one. But Caleb, you kind of say that heaven and earth are like two kids from the same parent. You put them in the same bedroom, like they share a bedroom. I like that interesting picture there, and that the church kind of surgically separated heaven and earth. So what changes in a congregation, in a church, in a people, we might say, when we stop describing ourselves as exiles and start believing that we belong here, like this is our home?
Yeah, I think everything changes. I mean, that's kind of a cop-out answer, but
no, I mean, I think that's a simple answer, because it's a pretty simple question going from everything else you've talked about, that salvation is holistic, that this is where we are, that this is what we were created for. Now, we talked a bit about this next one last year, but it's more in the news now, because and I can guarantee you that over the next several months leading up to the gubernatorial election here in the state, we're going to hear about it a lot in different viewpoints and different ideas. But you talk about XAI's Colossus supercomputer that went into South Memphis, and understand that this part of South Memphis is one of the poorest communities in Memphis. It's primarily African American, and this data center just went in. You know, no comment from the community, no opportunity for anybody to say, wait a second. And obviously it got rushed in because there's a lot of money to be made, but it also requires so much energy, most of these, the AI data centers especially, that it has gas turbines running that cause noise pollution, just the gas burning turbines sitting out there just trying to get there. And that, you know, here in our own state we see that, and we're seeing it in Nashville now, where they're wanting to put one near the zoo. And I can tell you, they're going to keep wanting more and more and more, because this is where technology companies think that the next big boom of money is going to be coming from, and it is for them. So you say the problem isn't that we need a new energy source. It's more that our continuous desire for more energy, like that desire for more and more and more and more growth, that we just, it's almost insatiable in terms of culture. But for Christians who kind of feel powerless in front of that, I mean, because I know I feel powerless sometimes. I mean, I even work in technology, so I have to deal in a lot of these areas, which makes me kind of a technology eco-hypocrite at times. But when we're dealing with these big systems, you know, and we see almost how it can feel almost like there's no hope for resisting some of this, and you can see if you watch the news or read about the data center in Nashville, how much trouble they're having just trying to slow it down even. So what is it for us that, if things seem so big, what's actually in our hands? What are the kind of things that we can do? Yeah.
Isn't that what God asked Moses, or Moses asked God, back in Exodus 3? What do you want me to do here? Yeah, absolutely. Whatever's in your hands. So actually this last week, we were at this wedding, and I'm sort of with the groom's people, and and after the wedding, they get us and they're taking pictures and it just goes on forever and everyone else has to wait to eat, but they maybe get some free drinks, and they're just over there just waiting and waiting. So I'm with the group of people. Emily's with the waiting crowd, and unbeknownst to me, but in classic Emily fashion, she has been locked in conversation with this sort of well-to-do guy, and they're talking about what she does and he does, and he's like, well, I build data centers. And and he's like, oh, you're from Nashville? We're looking at putting some data centers there. and so they just kind of locked in this conversation. And by the time I get there, she's like convincing him to hire some women of color and get like a listening, a local listening group together and all this. And anyway, the whole thing is just reminded me of like, oh wow, these are just people too. And that these are systems, but there's people in these systems, and that we're just one conversation away sometimes with maybe speaking something, maybe changing something in someone's life. And Catherine Hayhoe, who's like a legend. She's a Christian. She's a climate scientist, but she's also a Christian, and she's from Texas. She's got all the things, but she always says the most important thing you can do is just talk about it. And I think that there is such a power there as the people of God, as the church, and even individually, to all these things we're talking about tonight, and creation care and all this stuff. I mean, when was the last time you really had a great conversation about these things? These are things that maybe we have thoughts about, but maybe we're too afraid to talk about, or maybe it's been politicized, and so we kind of keep quiet because we don't want to rock the boat or anything. And so, but man, if something's important to you, you're going to talk about it. If you're not talking about it, it's not important to you. And so I think we have such power in the church as a voice in the world that I don't think we're really tapping into well. And I have seen, even within the last year, many communities in the States show up with their voices at town halls and stuff like that, and shut down data centers coming to their town. I mean, it's happened many times at this point. And how awesome is that? and that's like one aspect, but the using your voice thing, I think that, again, right, the first person that's going to tell you that your voice doesn't matter is Pharaoh. You know what I'm saying? He's definitely going to say that. And so, but you know what? The water still parted, and the Israelites still got out, didn't they? And all that. So
that's good. And I think especially you talk about how there are all these systems. We're all a part of different kinds of systems, but we're all people within them. And sometimes just having a conversation, being willing to have that conversation, can lead to change and at least understanding. And I hope that we all try to engage in that, especially with people we disagree with. Because if we don't, then we're not going to understand one another, and we're not going to affect any change if we aren't able to at least have conversations. And we are getting close here on time, but something that, and you talk about in garbage theology as well, about practices, things that can help us, like name the trees on your street, like not just maple or elm or even the Bradford pear things, but like name the trees, give them names, like so that you can think of that tree with a name, like give it meaning in that way. Kind of put your bare feet on the ground, feel the grass, go outside. There's times I know when I get stressed, I'm working at home, but if I get stressed sometimes looking at a screen, talking to customers or whatever, I'll just walk outside and look at the trees and the grass and what's going on out there. But also, pick up a new habit, work at it for 30 days, try to create something else. And we talk about what we care about. We save what we love. And I've been in the state long enough to have seen a lot of the ways that we've cared for this place in different times. I mean, does anybody remember Tennessee Trash? Yeah, Christy does. So there was a PSA back in the day, Tennessee Trash. There was this guy in an old convertible, and he's just going down the highway just throwing stuff out. And his name was Tennessee Trash. And the whole PSA was, don't be Tennessee Trash, like pick up. And it actually worked. I mean, you could see change in neighborhoods. Because in the 70s, and you were driving up and down, especially rural things, you would just see junk all in the ditches to the side of the road and stuff where people just threw out trash, didn't care about it. And so I think, this isn't an old idea for caring for where we live, but I think sometimes we get insulated from it by our technology and by what goes on. So what does loving a place look like for people? We've got a lake close by, we've got watershed.
Yeah.
There's things, what does it mean for us to love those things?
Oh man, how much time we got? Yeah. So I actually think you guys have a really cool spot here along this watershed. And so what does it look like? I'm just thinking about, someone in your community today, what it would mean to them to see a group of Christians in a church who was an active member of a watershed association. When you click on the partner link, you see the name of your church, right? There's a church, and they're a partner of the Watershed Association. They're showing up at these events. They're bringing their youth to clean up the trash by the stream. They're planting things. They're involved. They're a partner with the community. And I think in an age, back to the youth, when the youth and so many others, I just realized how old I sound when I say the youth, and so many others are leaving the church, and this is real time. They're leaving the church because it seems that the church just does not care about the earth and by extension them. To see a church who's just got stuff growing, who's involved in the watershed, who's showing up to care for these, the opportunities are endless, I think, for us communally to think about those things more creatively and partner, these low-hanging fruit partnerships that we can lock arms with, of people already doing great things around us. I mentioned my friend Joel Tooley, who's a Nazarene pastor in Melbourne, Florida. Their church partners with the Native Plant Society, and so the Native Plant Society just comes on in and plants all these native plants and puts up these little signs around their church and all this stuff. And we'll probably be planting some trees with them later this winter. And but there's so many different ways, and there's so many different. There's nothing that we do that is apart from creation. There's no choice that we make in a day. It's all part. And so the possibilities are endless, but we just need to kind of spark something there and kind of get cooking on it.
And if you are interested, Keep Walton Ferry Green meets in our church. Pastor Hunter can tell you all about it, but they are an organization working to keep some of the land near the Arboretum that is right here at the end of Luna Lane at Walton Ferry, trying to keep that green, much like the Beatty Farm. So if you know any story about the Beatty Farm over in the Indian Lake Peninsula that way, an organization got together and saved that land to turn it into park and to keep it green with trees and, as a haven for all the wildlife we have, the deer, the coyotes, all the stuff we have here in this little suburban area because we're on peninsulas. So part of that watershed is the Keep Walton Ferry Green. So that is a tangible way we can get involved and be involved in our community as well. So, and then I can tell you, Pastor Hunter's probably got all kinds of ideas that he would like to do with all this property we have. So there are things that our church can imagine and can do, I believe. So,
that's great.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight, Caleb. I am going to ask, could you close us in prayer tonight, please?
Yes. Could you hold this for a second?
Yeah,
I'll come
yeah.
right away.
Doing that, the Keep Walk Very Green group, 501c3 status, and if you go to that website, 1,000 signatures for the Hendersonville Boma to take us seriously to the city.
Oh, right on. That's cool. So I ran and grabbed one of the books, and I should have just had with me, because I guess maybe some of the pastoral thing came from, I just really felt compelled to try to lean into prayer in this book, and so every chapter ends with a prayer. So I thought, we'll just pray one of those. So, yeah, here we go. Dear God, help our knees to discover your soil. Help us to die to ourselves so that your kingdom may come through love. Give us the grace we need to confront our pride and confess our wrongs. Give us courage to examine our lives in the light of your love and justice in the world, that we may clearly see the reconciliatory work you desire of us. Lord, please light our way. Amen. Thanks, y'all.
All right, yep. Thanks so much for being out. Just a reminder, next week we end, and it's going to be pre-recorded because our guest is coming from Scotland and not the States. So if we were to stream live, it would be after midnight his time. But Reverend Dr. Steve Fountain is joining us. He and his wife Tasha co-pastor the Largs Church of the Nazarene in Largs, Scotland. And if you look that up, I think it's on the west coast of Scotland. It's usually cold there, but very beautiful. But they recently walked the Camino de Santiago, which is a pilgrimage route across Spain. And he's going to talk a bit about that experience. And he'll probably share us stuff about microbiology because he's one of those Renaissance men. He has an MD. He has a PhD in theology and literature. So, but he's also just a local pastor who believes very strongly in also caring for the earth and doing things. And he's going to tell us a bit about what walking across a country and going to different chapels meant for he and his wife. So look forward to doing that. And then the next Wednesday, so the first Wednesday of September, we begin a study in Galatians, and then we start the last quarter. We're going to have a lot of stuff going on, and you'll be seeing that. So thanks for coming out.